First off, I think it's hilarious. We do still have a podcast.
Isn't that nice?
We're still here.
After all this time.
Yeah, I mean, elephant in the room. There was kind of a massacre in radio earlier in November, and a lot of radio stations, including my own, were affected, and things were rough. And, you know, there were also world events and all kinds of crazy things. So we finally get a chance to sit down.
Yeah.
And the first thing I want to talk about is Alex Van Halen's book.
I have read excerpts. I have yet to commit to the full Monty, but I have every intention of doing that over the holidays. I have a list of several things I'm going to read and or listen to, and that is on there.
This is not going to take you very long. I'm not kidding. I really was so excited. Maybe it's partly that. Maybe it's partly I had really high expectations for this to be very personal and very point of view from Alex Van Halen, but it's not. It's like someone took maybe like a 3-hour interview with Alex and then interspersed it with a whole lot of quotes and a whole lot of magazine articles and a whole lot of like David Lee Roth's book and this much Michael Anthony. I mean, you've really got to comb through to find his name even mentioned.
I will say this, 90% conjecture and 10% inside information. Michael Anthony's a hell of a guy. That part is there's no denying. And when you're a really good stand-up grassroots dude and you're in a band with the Van Halen brothers and David Lee Roth, they don't like to talk about you very much because you're just on a different plane. He is the salt of the earth, and he was in a band with 3 challenging individuals. Let's call it that.
I'm kind of pissed off. I paid full fare.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I feel like the interviews that he did for the book have more personal information than the actual book. And then you're kind of expecting this book to be very much, like I said, his point of view and a lot of like this, Ed and I that. And that is there. I'm not saying it's devoid of it, but it's also just like really laden down with a ton of like David Lee Roth, and then David did this, and then David said that, and let me set the record straight on this one, and here's how I saw it. But also underneath it all, this very similar to how he feels about Eddie, feelings about Dave, you know, this whole like, we were brothers and we loved each other and we fought all the time, but we were brothers and we loved each other. And Dave, we fought all the time and, you know, but it was like brothers, but we don't love each other.
I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by that. Did we talk about this a couple months ago? But he did the interview with Rolling Stone before the book came out. And in that one, he was talking about, and I guess he touches on it in the book, the fact that he was still pissed off that Eddie played on Michael Jackson's "Beat It," and I remember going, "Wait, what?" Like, I mean, just of all the things to still have, like, 1984, great record, huge hit record. Part of the reason was a whole bunch of pop kids suddenly knew who Eddie Van Halen was. And I was like, dude, you cashed in because of that hour of your brother's life. What are you talking about?
Is it coincidence that your first #1 hit came after he did that? Like,
I don't think there's
pop ethos.
Yeah. I think there may be a connection there, but like I said earlier, those, you know, I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of people over the years, from very much insiders to peripheral to promoters to everybody, and the story has always been Van Halen was this guy, and then these 3 other types of people. You know, Michael Anthony was like, "Hey, dude, how you doing? Good to see you. How are the kids? Great. How are you?" And then there's 3 just other types. You know what I mean? Like,
just whirling dervishes of
and Eddie and Dave, you know, or Eddie and Alex, I should say, their childhood, like all those stories about them coming over from the Netherlands and you know, just being completely on the outside looking in of their childhood, and their dad was a hard case musician, and they did not have it easy. I mean, they were the guys in the garage playing music because nobody wanted to know them, not because they were cool. You have this thing when you're a kid, like, I'm going to be in a band because it'll be cool. And then at some point you realize, like, the cool kids aren't in bands. They're playing football. They're
one of the things I liked a lot was him talking about how his dad took him to gig with him.
Yeah.
So he was like 13 or 14 years old, and he and dad were like slamming beers, because this is the freaking early 70s when DUIs were like getting a speeding ticket. Mm-hmm. And he and dad would be slamming beers on the way home in the middle of the night, and he would have to go with his dad because his dad needed a drummer, and he was a teenage kid. And he said that it affected his relationship. He thinks it affected everyone's relationship with Eddie because and apparently it's Ed now, with Ed, because Ed was always so sensitive. And then this was a thing that, he felt like Alex and dad had without him. And it's just because he was too young to go, because he was 9 and like Alex was like 12. And apparently there was some kind of a line there, but it was really
there's a handful of words you don't normally hear in the same sentence. Tortured, alcoholic, Dutch jazz musician. Just throw that all into one little, you're like, a Dutch jazzer. Okay. And I mean, it makes perfect sense that there would be some emotional turmoil involved in that household.
Oh, and I think that the main reason he's still mad about the Michael Jackson thing, I don't think it's because Ed played on it. I think it's because he told Ed not to. And then while he was out of town, Ed went and did it without telling him. And then it was done. Sure. And then at the end, apparently Ed didn't even get credit or something to that effect, but he had gone into the studio and done like a whole producer style arrangement of the song.
Yeah, he reworked it.
Yeah, and then played his guitar over it, and then also was like, no credit, nobody knows I did it.
Well, but the truth, but when the record came out, everybody knew. I mean, it was like, that I was a high school senior when Thriller was released. Everybody knew Eddie Van Halen was playing on that damn song.
Apparently, he's still mad that Ed produced Dweezil Zappa's first record when he was a kid, too. I think Dweezil was like 12 years old.
You know how good your life has been when that's the stuff you're still pissed off about? It's like Jay Moore has a great bit in his act about when addicts hit rock bottom and you go into the AA meetings. And he was like, Keith Richards said he got sober after he fell out of that tree in Fiji and had a head injury. And Jay Moore goes, do you know how great your life is when your bottom is falling out of a coconut tree in Fiji on vacation in your 60s? When that's your bottom, it's been okay.
Yeah, he's fine. He's just fine. I feel like with you as an author and having read your book, and your book being so detailed and so personal and so just telling the story, to read this book was just a huge letdown after that, because he tells little teeny tiny bits, and then he quotes someone else, and then he kind of comments on it, and then he quotes someone else.
Well, I tell you what, I'd give up some of what you love about my book if I could play the intro to Hot for Teacher correctly. I would trade that off.
Fair point. I mean, who am I to say? I mean, the guy plays drums. He doesn't write books. Fair enough.
I tell you what, I've always said this about Alex Van Halen. It's tough to be inarguably one of the great drummers of your generation and nobody notices or cares because your brother is Edward Van Halen. And you know what? And if Eddie hadn't been Eddie, then you had Diamond Dave. It's like, who's going to pay attention to the drummer when those two guys are standing in front of you? That's a lot to carry, because Alex is great. I've always loved his drumming, and nobody, all those top drummers of whatever lists, you never see him on there, and he's absolutely fantastic.
And that's totally unfair, because phenomenal musician.
In a different way, it's like Phil Rudd, the ACDC, the classic lineup, if you will. Mm-hmm. That band, when Phil Rudd has not been in ACDC, they had perfectly fine, wonderful drummers, and they never, ever for 1 second felt like ACDC. That guy makes that band, and nobody cares. Drummers care, but no one else does. It's one of those things.
So can we transition to ACDC announcing their US tour with only 13 dates and completely skipping my market?
And stadiums too. They have never ever played stadiums in America. So maybe they're thinking, okay, instead of 40 arenas, let's just do 13 stadiums and hopefully everyone travels, which I totally get. And that would make sense to me as well. I'm excited because day one is Minneapolis. So and by the way, I think I've told you this. I see that stadium from my window. I'm right across the river from the stadium. It's great.
So you don't have to get parking.
No parking needed. I can literally walk to an ACDC gig for the first time in my life. I'm very excited.
Maybe I should fly out to see it in Minneapolis then, because it's not coming to the Bay, or at least
let's go.
Definitely not yet. I was thinking that they might still announce it as an Aftershock headliner, but if that happened, it would have to be a one-off in October, and this tour is, April, May.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I say this with absolute legitimate love and respect. How many shows does Brian Johnson have in him? I mean, the clips I saw from last year's European tour, I think he's a miracle worker for doing what he's done so far. The guy's 77, and he sang parts on records 44 years ago that were hard then. So, and he had the whole hearing thing 8 years ago when Axl came in. I've been saying we're giving away tickets on the morning show every day. We're thrilled. First gig of the tour, Minneapolis, and every day I say, if you've never seen him, you go get there. This is I don't have any information other than this. I'd bet the house this is the last time.
Yeah, and I'm this is my conversation that I keep having with myself over and over. It's like, okay, you've seen ACDC a bunch.
Yep.
I saw ACDC in Belgium once. I've seen them. So
I too have seen them in Belgium. Go figure.
What?
What
year was it?
2001.
Oh, okay, this was 2015. That would have been so freaky if it was the same time.
It would have been.
I saw him at the Grass Pop Metal Meeting Festival grounds.
I'll take your word for it.
I think, yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I've seen a lot of ACDC shows. So part of me is like, is it worth the vacation time?
Yeah.
But
there's a difference between seeing them again and seeing them for what you're pretty darn sure would be the last time. Going in, there's always a chance that you're somehow disappointed. But when that's what it is, because it's Angus and Malcolm and three dudes. I mean, that's who the band is now. And nothing against those three dudes. I'm thrilled that they have a gig. What could be more fun, sincerely, than like, oh, by the way, hey, how you doing? Good. How you doing? Good. Oh, but did I mention I'm in ACDC now? What could be a better thing for any musician on earth to be able to say? So great for them. But it's not Cliff and it's not Phil and it's not obviously Malcolm. So that said, if going in to see again, saying, I'm really looking forward to it because I am thinking this is the last time I'm ever going to see Angus Young play ACDC songs. I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. I don't care what else happens. I'm really excited about it. I've seen that band close to 30 times, and the worst ACDC gig I ever saw was great.
Do you notice how whenever a band calls it the farewell tour, we're like, bullshit.
Yeah.
And here they are not calling it a farewell tour. And we're like, this is the end, people. It's end game 100% for ACDC. And if you don't see them, you never will.
Well, of course they wouldn't call it that. They don't do anything. The ACDC doesn't do anything other bands do. This is the band that for 25 years has turned down the Super Bowl. That's true. They have been asked repeatedly. I have a buddy who, for years, he's a big shot. For years, he is actually the Fox Sunday NFL package. They have all their broadcasts the whole day long. He's the director of the whole thing in LA. He sits there they have 9 games going on consecutively, and he's the director for the national broadcast. And I've been in the studio watching him do that, and it's like watching someone juggle 1,000 balls at once. I looked at it. I never looked at him the same way again. I was like, "You're a complete freak." And one day and he's a huge Black Crowes fan. That's how I met him. He's a big fan of the Black Crowes. And one day met him. A mutual friend introduced us, and we got to be buddies. And great guy. And I'm not going to say his name just because, who knows if he wants me to share this. But I said to him in 2010 or 11, we were chatting, and I go, "Oh, by the way," I go, "when is the NFL going to get their head out of their ass and ask ACDC to do the Super Bowl?" And he looked at me, he goes, "Dude, they ask every year." And I said, "What?" He goes, "The NFL asks ACDC. He goes, every year since the mid-90s, and every year the answer is no, we don't do medleys." Wow. They're the coolest band of all time.
Because they're the band everyone wants to do the Super Bowl.
Well, of course. I hate to say this, there's nothing bigger. They say no. They stopped asking now because they're like, they said every time, like, "Wait, 12 minutes and you want us to do a medley?" No, we don't do that. I mean, I always thought, what if they went out and just did Let There Be Rock for 12 minutes? Wouldn't that be the greatest Super Bowl halftime show of all time? Yes. It would be. And I'm convinced, and maybe I'm maniacally myopic, if that happened, if in the middle of a Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen, ACDC, and they came out in the beginning back in 19 and Let There Be Rock, and then it was 12 minutes long, 8.5 minutes of it was a guitar solo. I guarantee you multiple generations of people would go, "Oh my God, I love rock music. I forgot how great it could be."
And then they end it with just the very beginning just a very ending of, like, For Those About to Rock, just so that we can get the 21 Guns.
Sure. Got to have cannons. Yeah. Let it go.
Yeah.
No, how cool is that? ACDC said no repeatedly for years. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's been like, because we've all been wanting Metallica to do the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've been asked and said no, but I do know that they have had issues with that same thing of, like, it can't be live. We don't like to go out there and, like, pretend to be live. And then you only get, X amount of minutes, and you don't get to do your own production and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but the fans want to see it, man.
I mean, I get Metallica not doing it. Because there's a handful of artists that you can say the last thing they need is to fit themselves into somebody else's box. Metallica can go just be Metallica, and they're the biggest rock band of the last 30 plus years. And why? I mean, I'd be the same way. And that's how ACDC's always looked at it. They don't have the same, they're not as big, if you will, as Metallica right now, but they're ACDC. They still made the biggest rock record of all time. And, Back in Black has outsold everything short of, like, Thriller and the Eagles' greatest hits worldwide. It's like, why would we go condense a bunch of our songs? Who cares?
Yeah.
That's the last thing they need.
We don't do remixes in hard rock and metal.
Yeah, it's great. I love that about it.
We had the Super Bowl in San Francisco. Metallica did the night in between. So when the Super Bowl, the first one at Levi's Stadium, Metallica played at Oracle Park, where the Giants play. They did, like, the not Super Bowl night.
Got it. Yeah.
I think they called it the night before. The night in between is what they're calling it. Is the in between, because they're doing 2 shows on each stadium stand on this tour.
Oh, right.
And the night in between is the night in between of the 2-night stand. But it was, I think it was the night before, and it was like Super Bowl Eve, and they did a concert.
Because they can.
Yeah. Because they're Metallica. They can call up, the local ballpark.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, we're going to play.
Yeah.
Super Bowl weekend. You'll love it. It's going to be great. It's like the Saturday night show. It'll be great.
Oh, I just saw right before, speaking of all this, when we went on air, did you a little bit of an earthquake today, or that was north of the Bay Area, I guess?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, that was the first break I did today. When I came in, I was like, hey, how many of you got that call from your friends that don't live in the Bay? And we're like, hey,
Well, the first thing I saw was it said Bay Area earthquake, and I clicked, and then I saw Eureka, and I was like, "Oh wait, no, that's
Right.
that's way up there."
It was like people think NorCal stops at Santa Rosa. You know, they don't realize there's like a whole chunk of state there. It's all pre-Oregon at that point. But yeah,
I remember the first time I did the San Francisco. Oh, the next gig's in Portland, and then you're in the van going,
how far is Portland?
What? Wait a minute. It's supposed to be like right there, right? Yeah. People from east of the Mississippi have no concept of space and size until they go. You know, you get out there and you're. I mean, hell, Oregon is a huge state. You know what I mean? It's like it's bigger than anything over here, and you're like, how far is this?
And it's the same for us. I mean, when I hear friends talk about driving across 3 states to go to a concert, and I'm like, that's madness. Why wouldn't you just fly?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, first off, they call them flyover states for a reason. And secondly,
yeah, right. Yeah. Like, well, it's 109 miles. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's crazy. But what we had was a 7.0 earthquake, and it was about 100 miles off the coast. And it was also just south of Eureka. And a place where most people just don't know. It's just like a coast up there. And it's a beautiful area, but fortunately it's not, you know, major city. It's not a lot of buildings all stacked on top of each other. And because epicenter was so far off base, was so far in the water that it was kind of fine. I mean, people got rocked. I had a friend in Oakland was like, did you just feel that? My whole car was just shaking.
Wow.
And that's, you know, a good 300 miles, 200 miles away.
Yeah. Wow.
So it shook really hard, but so far, no injuries and no major damage. And it also happened around low tide. So the tsunami warning was more of just a knee-jerk reaction than any real worry.
Yeah, that's the one that always freaks me out is that whole Oregon coastline, not really the Northern California. It's like you read those articles where they go, oh, by the way, in 1820 or whatever year it was, and you're like, oh, wait, that could happen again. That's pretty scary. The tsunamis earthquakes are one thing. Tsunamis are a whole different thing.
We had double-digit earthquakes in the 1800s out in like Death Valley when nobody lived.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they're on record in like the 18 somethings. Some of the early first, it's crazy. It sounds like it's walking time for Chauncey.
He's just going about his paces. He's just seeing what's up.
Aw,
sniffing around a little bit.
All right. So I guess what you're saying is we do have time to talk about the 49ers and how this season has gone.
A necessary, separation of the wheat from the chaff, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not a 49ers fan. I respect the brand. I respect the organization. Watching the game, loving the snow and Buffalo. And I will say this, without a dog in the fight, when McCaffrey went down, I went, like, no. I mean, I saw it as soon as he just, you see him hitch, stop, and go down. And I just put my face right in my hands. I was like, oh my God, he looks so amazing until that moment. Yeah, terrible.
Yeah. Oh God.
But the only, well, it's not the only good thing. There's a million good things about the Niners, but the best thing is, this year sucks. It's over. It's going to be fine. They rebuild, they retool, they do whatever they have to do. You got to understand, you're talking to a Tennessee Titans fan. The infrastructure, the differences are night and day. All right. The Titans get to the AFC Championship. I was in San Francisco in January of 2020 when they played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And ever since that day, it's just been a downhill slide that they can't stop. The Niners will be back before you know it. It won't be this year, and it shouldn't be. Shut it down. Figure out what you're going to do. You got a great GM. You got great ownership. You got great everything. You got a great coach. All you need. It's going to be fine.
Great ownership, but we've got reasonable ownership.
Well, they stay out of the way for the most part. They don't meddle. I'm dealing with a meddling owner with my Tennessee Titans, and it's just, we're the team that fired Mike Vrabel, who's going to be coaching somebody next year and being very successful at that because he's a great coach. The less we say about the Titans, the happier I am.
I feel like we're supposed to have the sum of our parts be greater, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like our parts are greater than the sum of what we've been getting out of them. I feel like we've got really good receivers. I feel like we've got a great quarterback. I feel like we've got good coaching. I feel like something has just kind of not coalesced. There's not a coagulant to keep that team together, but they're all doing well individually.
Well, that's one of the things about football. It's all about it's truly it's the ultimate team sport. It's all about everybody being on the same page, and there's little things in the ether. You have all the tangibles, and there's some intangibles. But you know what? When you've got a team that's beaten up and injured, and you don't have the same 11, or I should say 22 guys week to week to week, and you don't even have them for 2 weeks in a row ever, it's gonna look like this season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not great. Yeah. Now it just feels like preseason. It's like I'm watching all the games. I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
Nothing matters.
Again, you're talking to a Titans fan.
Sorry.
It's fine, but I mean, I'm
also a Raiders fan, so that pressure's been off all season.
Well, then that's a rough one. That's a whole nother bag of bizarre whatever you're walking around with.
Oh God, yeah. Anything else coming up, or you want to call it?
Let's see. Nothing comes to mind. I don't know. Just we're all in the let's just get to Christmas run. Let's get to the end of the year.
Yeah.
2025 is right around the corner. And of all the things I'm not excited about for 2025, hope springs eternal that some unexpected joy and developments will occur, and we'll all look back and say it was okay in the end of the day.
Yeah, I feel like
how's that?
I feel like at the end of every year, we're always like, "This year sucked." Blah.
Yeah.
There's always
that's always the case. But the truth of the matter is, we're still here.
We are.